Good evening and welcome to SLA Europe's webinar, Getting to Unconscious Working Out Loud. We are delighted to have Dennie Heye with us. Dennie is based in the Netherlands, where he works at Shell as the Knowledge and Information Management Lead for Discipline Engineering. He is the chairperson at KMRT, Knowledge Management Roundtable, an informal network of senior knowledge and information managers based in complex and large companies. He was the co-founder of the Oil and Gas Special Interest Group in AIM, the Association for Intelligent Information Management, and was also appointed as an SLA Fellow in 2013. On top of all this, he is also an author and is currently working on his fourth fiction book. So let's give Dennie a warm welcome for tonight's presentation.
Thank you very much, Catherine. So the presentation today is called Getting to Unconscious Working Out Loud, a Knowledge Management Story. And the part unconscious and working out loud will become clear further in the story, because we at Shell believe knowledge management is not about tools, it's about behaviors, and especially behaviors that are shared across the company. So before we start, from our legal department, I always have to show this slide, and please read it very carefully. But in a nutshell, it means that whatever I'm saying here should not influence you to buy or sell any shares you may have in Royal Dutch Shell. Catherine already kindly introduced me to the audience, but a few more words related to my background. So I've started out in this industry as a librarian. I started working at Deloitte in 1996, moved over to Shell in 2002, and I quickly realized that the library science world was having a lot of skills and experiences that would also benefit other parts of the company. So after a few years, I also branched out into information governance, records management. I worked a lot on intelligent search engines, and over the past couple of years, I've also been delving a lot into new areas like machine learning and content analytics, because we're not just keeping information for records management purposes, we're also trying to get more value out of that. For example, where are pockets of knowledge and expertise in our organization that we are not aware of, but we can find out because people leave a lot of digital trails. I also have a college degree in marketing, and that may seem like a very odd fit with the library science side, but I must say that every day I benefit from having marketing skills, because it's about selling your services, selling your profession, and understanding what people's needs and requirements are. That's about me. So a little bit about Shell. So this is a slide from last year, so some numbers have changed, and I'm not going to go over all of them, but the one that maybe is helpful to understand for this presentation is the amount of employees that we have. So currently we have around 83,000 employees, and we have about 500,000 of contractors working for Shell. So we are huge, and that also does create problems with our scale and complexity. And when we're talking about knowledge management, I always make the joke that every problem that you have in Shell, there is someone else who is already working on it, or has already thought about it, or could help you. But you just have to figure out who that person is, and that is not an easy question. So then when we zoom in a little bit around those people, we operate in over 70 countries, and that also includes a lot of small remote countries. So for example, I usually start my day with calls to my colleagues in Australia, where we have a large project going on. I will have calls with Bangalore and Chennai in India, where there's a lot of our support staff. Then following the sun, there will be countries like Oman or Qatar in the Middle East. Then of course Europe comes online, got a lot of colleagues in the Netherlands and in the UK. And then over time, our main hub in the Americas is in Houston, And then usually at the tail end of my day, I will still have some calls with some of our HR folks who are based in Calgary. So that also makes the job very interesting, is that, you know, over a day, I make a virtual trip around the world. And as you can see, you know, a lot of these numbers just show the complexity of organizations. So we have a huge amount of skills, a huge amount of expertise. People also spend a lot of years in Shell. My manager currently, for example, has 35 years in Shell. One colleague is going to celebrate 42 years of service in Shell. And that just, you know, also indicates that we have a lot of, you know, knowledge and expertise and competencies in the company, but how do we, you know, benefit from that? And that's what I want to bring to you in my coming presentation. So briefly, for those of you that are not familiar with Shell, we're a very large company, and we are what we call an IOC, an integrated oil company, meaning we do all the steps for the energy generation, all the way from the drilling and generation and refineries all the way down to the customer. So a lot of people only know it from the retail stations, but we also operate offshore platforms, we operate wind farms, we are in the chemicals industry. So for example, if you're using something like a plastic bottle, you know, parts of that plastic come from one of our chemical refineries. We deliver stuff to the paint industry, to the chemical industry. The hand sanitizer that you're using, part of the ingredients comes from our production units. We also have a very huge trading and supply arm in Shell. So we trade oil and gas with different suppliers. And every time I'm amazed that, you know, I ask a question and we're doing something in that part. So what is the knowledge management challenge at Shell? And the picture we often use is the iceberg. So if you picture an iceberg, at the top is the explicit knowledge. So that's the knowledge that is documented, that you can point to, that is easily found, and it's usually in systems. Yeah? So it could be on your intranet or your document management system. And you know, these are some numbers. It's around 60 petabytes of information. And that may seem like a lot, but actually the most of our knowledge is what we call tacit. And that's in the heads of all our people. So we have a lot of experts, we have a lot of people that have been with Shell for a long time, or we have people that came from another organization which have knowledge which they build up over years in different companies and now are coming into Shell. So how do we know that someone maybe works for a supply chain that we want to know about? And it's very hard to find and transfer. And it's also the one that can leave, because if people are leaving Shell, that knowledge basically walks out the door. So we have defined 4 core purposes for knowledge management in Shell. And it's about making connections. So the first one is connecting people to validated content. So every day in Shell, we create millions of documents and emails. And I would say 99.9% is of no relevance to anyone but the sender and receiver. But there is a lot of what we call validated content. So think about manuals, think about standards, think about lessons learned. But these things have to be validated. So we have appointed experts in our company. So within a certain skill pool or discipline, and I work for engineering, there is a hierarchy of expertise. And these people have roles. So if you are an expert in a certain field, so say pipeline corrosion, you will get a certain percentage of your time that you are allowed to spend on these expertise tasks. That can be defining courses, that can be coaching young engineers, that can also be validating or authoring certain documents. Because we want to make sure that if people find a standard, that they can trust that that standard is up to date and has also been signed off by an expert. So these experts validate certain knowledge. and that is easily recognizable in our system. So you can do a search, and you'll be able to see, well, if I search in this area, I can find some stuff that's non-validated, but if I search in the knowledge management systems or I go to a certain portal, I will be able to trust that that information that is there is up to date and has been validated, and I can act upon it. And we also want to make sure that it is easy to access. So every expertise area has a specific portal. So for example, there is a pipeline corrosion portal. And if you have a question about pipeline corrosion, you go to that portal, you will see the standards, you will see the manuals, you will see the lessons learned, you will see the experts, you will see the latest network calls, the courses coming up, etc., etc. So we try to make it easy for people to find that. It takes a lot of effort and time to maintain that, but it's really beneficial. The second part, and I already alluded to that, is connecting people to people. So as said, we have an enormous amount of people in Shell, and we have a large number of experts, but we want to be able to find those people. So let me start by explaining how we make these experts visible. So experts are appointed. In the profile system, like our internal LinkedIn, you will then be tagged with a certain title. So it will not just say Dennie Heye, it will say Dennie Heye, subject matter expert in a certain area. If people are searching on that expertise area, say pipeline corrosion, my name would pop out on the top. So even if 100 other people put pipeline corrosion in their profile, my name would be ranking higher. You will also see my name automatically pop up on portals. If you go to pipeline corrosion portal, you will automatically see my name there listed with my picture, immediate link to my Skype, immediate link to my email account. So that helps us to get those people visible. We also care a lot about the people that are not experts because they may have experience. You may want to figure out, hey, we did a project in this location about a couple of years ago. I want to talk to someone who worked in that project because I'm going to do something that's very similar. So we have, as I said, some sort of LinkedIn internally, and people can fill out their profile. So basic details are already filled in via the HR systems, but people can fill out the projects they've worked on, documents they've authored, external board positions they have, committees that they're sharing. It's not easy to convince people to keep this up to date, but we constantly try to remind people that this is helpful, because if you have a question, there's nothing better than going to the search engine, typing a few keywords, and finding a person to talk to. And over time, we've realized that a lot of people would prefer to talk to a person who has been in the same situation, is working in the same area, than to try and find a document and then try to get the knowledge from that. So we're really trying to connect people to people. Supporting collaboration. So that also builds on connecting those people and people to knowledge. So we were one of the first companies at scale to set up discussion forums. So early 90s, when Shell was just starting to use internal company email, one of the first uses for internal company email were email lists for solving technical questions. So if people were working in a laboratory somewhere, or they were in a refinery and they had a problem, they couldn't solve it, and they asked the people around them, and they also didn't know it. So they would quickly fire off an email to colleagues that they knew that were in similar positions, or that they met a couple of years ago at a conference, say, hey, I see you're also working on developing a certain chemical, can you help? And they quickly realized that if they were quite disciplined in formulating the question correctly, and people would reply within like 1 or 2 days, that this was very, very, very powerful. So people would send a question. There was no nonsense in those emails. It was just like, I have a problem with this, these are the details, and people would share their replies. And everyone that was in the email loop could learn about that. So even if you did not have the problem at the time of the question, maybe like 3 weeks later or 3 months later, you realize, I remember I saw an email around that. So mid-90s, late 90s, we switched to online discussion forums, and that's now, it's, I believe, fourth generation of interface. And these forums are still going very strong. So these forums are centered around expertise areas or communities of practice. So it could be that we start something new like wind energy. So there's a lot of people that have experience in wind energy. We bring all of them together in one forum. A moderator is assigned to that. And then we tell these people, hey, you can post your question here. Every time you post a question, an email trigger goes out to the audience, usually via a daily summary. So people get this email and they see the latest post. We train the moderators to make sure there is no noise in there. Yeah? So this is not meant to post pictures of you in your car or look what I ate for lunch. This is all about there is a problem and I need a solution, or here is the latest standards and please share this. So it's like not a lot of messages per day, but very high value for the people that are in there. And most of the times people are signed up to these discussion forums when they enter a certain skill pool. So if you become a corrosion pipe engineer, you will automatically be signed up for that forum. It's opt out, not opt in, because we want to make sure that if you're part of the community, you're part of the knowledge sharing. And some of these forums have been there for over 20 years and still going strong. And if you think about it, we also keep all those messages. So as if you're, for example, working on refinery, some of the equipment there can be 40 years old. So sometimes we have to go back to a discussion that was dating back to 2002, because people that have long left the company posted questions or answers there that are still relevant today. And then lastly, but certainly not least, it's the capturing and sharing of lessons learned. So every time we do something like a major project or a new technology, we try to capture the lessons. So it could be that at the end of a certain project stage, we send in a facilitator and he or she interviews all the people involved, like, what did you do? What standard did you use? Did you deviate from the standard? Why did you deviate from the standard? What things went wrong? What could we learn from it? Who should know this? That all these lessons then get filtered into a database. They get tagged with keywords. The expert can validate the lessons, and then the next time someone goes into the database, they can find that. And these lessons will also be triggered via email to people that are signing up for certain areas. So for example, you could sign up saying, hey, I'm interested in wind in the North Sea because I have to predict the wave currents. You can sign up anytime something is tagged with offshore currents and wind, North Sea. You will only get the lessons that are tagged with those keywords. So these are the purposes why we do knowledge management. And one thing that always strikes me here is that we're not talking about tools here. We're talking about people and content and collaboration. So let me now show you how we make this work. So we're using 9 elements, 9 tools that work together as a machine to support all of this. So the slogan on the top just summarizes what I just said. And the way that we're facilitating all of this is through like 9 tools and then some supporting elements. So let me summarize the tools. So like any company, we have a search engine, but we're trying to make sure that the search engine is quite intelligent. So for example, we've built in the acronym dictionary. Like any company, we have acronyms for everything, usually 3 letters. And it can mean a variety of things. So over the years, we've collected lists of acronyms. Those are now important in the search engine. So if you type in a certain acronym, the searcher will prompt you like, did you mean this or that? And then you click on it and it will find your search. We've also made sure, for example, that if you type in certain words, that certain portals or certain experts are ranking higher than anything else. That's what I told you about. Then there are the professional communities. So those are the discussion forums, and we have quite a number of them around certain areas of expertise. I've talked about the expertise finder. We also have something called a knowledge repository. So every professional community can have a document storage location where they keep like the top 25, 30 key documents that they say, hey, in the old days when you would join the company, these would be the hard copies that they would put on your desk, like, okay, young man or young woman, you're going to be an engineer, read this. This is the manual. This is the standard. This is training. Read this. That's now all digital. So we're putting this in the knowledge repository. And it's up now to the experts to maintain those documents. Then there's the content validation. So that is the part that if something has to be validated, the system knows if it's labeled with pipeline corrosion. Dennie is the expert, so please send an email to Dennie that he has to validate that document and remind him every, say, 12 to 18 months whether the document is still up to date. The lessons learned is summarized under the learning from experience. And we have something that used to be called the Shell Wiki and what we now call the Enterprise Encyclopedia. Anyone in Shell can make a page or maintain a page in the Enterprise Encyclopedia. A lot of people use this to store certain, like checklists or good practices or things that previously were in a brochure or a memo format. And we have a team that can help you set them up, tag them, format them. But it's anyone in Shell can make a page, and some see some wonderful collaboration. I often use it that if people ask me certain questions, how to do certain things. If people ask me for the third time, I make an Enterprise Encyclopedia page and I just send them the link. Like, I'm not gonna explain to you for the fourth time, how to request a certain thing, go here. And if something changes, someone else can edit that page, even if I've left the company. And then a lot of people say, man, that's a lot of tools. How do I remember all of this? Well, the only thing you have to remember is what we call the SPOA, the single point of access. So that's the portal I was talking about. So every community, every skill pool has a single point of access portal, which we give a certain name. You bookmark that, and from there you can find the search engine, you can find the knowledge repository, you can find the experts, you can find the lessons learned, what have you. Everything is tracked through the performance dashboard. So every click, every download, every interaction is tracked in a dashboard. I am one of the knowledge management leads, so I represent knowledge management for engineering. So every week I get a refreshed dashboard. How many questions were posted on the communities and how many questions have gone unanswered? How many likes were posted on certain posts? How many people have a certain skill? Which documents have been downloaded the most? It is numbers, but it helps me to engage with the communities on how they are doing. So if I see, for example, the number of posts is dropping, I see less people tagging themselves, I see documents that are validated going out of date, I don't see any new lessons coming in, that is a red flag for me. And then I will go to the community and say, hey guys, if you have to put in the effort to make it work, what can we do to get you up to speed? And I must say, it's also really nice for the people in the community that, if they're active, they see the numbers. So they see what they're doing, if they're doing a training or a promotion campaign, that gives results. For those that want to know, it's a Power BI dashboard, so it's also nice and interactive. So when I'm speaking to the senior leaders, if they have a question, I can quickly drill down in the data, like they want to see like the portal. How many clicks did the portal have? How many came from Europe? How many came from the Americas? So that's helpful. But all of this, and let me repeat that again, are just tools. The tools don't work unless you make them integral with a taxonomy. I don't have to explain to this audience what a taxonomy is, but I remember when I was in library school, we were taught how to make thesauri. And at that time, I was thinking, man, this is like the most boring topic on earth, and I cannot imagine any practical use for this in the future. Well, little did I know that 20 years later, taxonomies is where the blood is. This is what makes the whole machine connected. So we have taxonomies around the expertise areas, and the taxonomy is integral to connect everything. So the taxonomy is embedded for the skills, it's in the search, it's in the communities, it's in the validation. So without the taxonomy, nothing works because people use too many different words for the same thing or related things. So we have a monthly updated taxonomy. I'm in charge for engineering. So if someone says, well, hey, Denny, I need a new keyword for, I don't know, wind energy, I will have to sign off on that we only use wind energy, and I have to supply what are related words, what are synonyms, so that it completely works across the whole knowledge management platforms. And that still is on the tool side. I cannot stress enough the governance. Yeah, so we need to make sure that before we launch anything in knowledge management, we have some serious discussions with that group. Who will be the moderator? Who are your experts? Who's going to make sure that people are not going to use email to ask questions, but they're going to use these platforms? So we document all of that. So I have a list of the roles and responsibilities for engineering. I meet with all my focal points every month. Once every quarter, I meet with the skill pool managers just to make sure that everyone is playing their part to keep this going. Because if no one is feeling responsible, then it just won't happen. And we also have support services. So on the tool side, we have one dedicated help desk that completely understand all these tools and also can speak the language of the customer. So it's IT people, but that have been specifically trained in knowledge management. It's one email address, so if someone finds a dead link or search doesn't work as they think it should, they just fire off one email and they can usually troubleshoot it within a couple of hours. Otherwise, if it's something more structural, they pick it up, but they will communicate then to key employees like myself, like, hey guys, we're having a problem with the search. We've talked to Microsoft. It's going to take 48 hours. Please be aware that this won't work, or it will work differently as you imagined. And then it's up to me to inform my other users. And we've aligned it what we call the technical functions. So Shell is a technical company by nature. So we have what we call certain functions. So we have maritime, we have engineering, we have R&D, we have wells, exploration. And these have been in Shell as long as we can remember. So we may reorganize every couple of years, but that's just the org chart, how people's reporting line is. The way how we run the company is still is relatively stable. And that really helps, especially with the governance. If I want to set something up, there is an existing organization. There is a certain management structure in place. There are indicators where I know whether someone works in exploration or is a finance person. So we've not set up a separate structure for knowledge management. We've aligned with something that was already there, because it's close to impossible to set up a new structure because the organization is complex and volatile enough as is. And last, but certainly not least, and that's where I'll spend a little bit more time on the next slide, it's underpinned by behaviors. Yeah. So say you set up all these tools perfectly, you have a wonderful taxonomy, everyone, all the roles and responsibilities are in place, you have a perfect alignment. If people are not working according to certain behaviors, it will all fall apart. So we use a certain slogan that's called working out loud. And it's about doing things, and while you're doing it, you tell people about it, you look for information, and you share. Yeah, and these are certain behaviors that we like to drive. It's not something unique to Shell. There are other companies that have either the same slogan. I believe Fluor, for example, the engineering company, also uses it. But it's about driving certain behaviors. Yeah, and in summary, what we like to ask from people is that before you do something, find the best solution. Yeah, so if you have a problem and you don't know how to solve it, go out there, because there is a standard, there's a lessons learned database. Go and find if there is an existing solution. Make yourself visible. We have a lot of people that have great skills and expertise. Maybe spend 5 minutes, every 6 to 8 months, and check your profile and update it, because we may want to be able to find you. A good example here is that a couple of years ago, we were retiring some very old hardware and software, and that system had been in shell for a long time, but we didn't have the specific expertise to basically dismantle that system. We were just about to hire a very expensive IT consultant, and then someone did a search on the search engine and type in like certain programming language, certain database, and there was someone who used to work in IT many years ago, had now moved into, I believe, finance, but had listed in his profile like, I was one of the original developers on system XYZ. So we found that person, and that person was able to help us very quickly figure out how to basically dismantle that system and transfer the data to another system. And we're really also trying to make sure that people coach each other. Yeah, so nothing is as powerful if more experienced people coach others. So in your profile, you can indicate whether you are available for coaching and mentoring. So if you are a new engineer or a new IT developer, you can search for it, you can set up a call with people and get that coaching. And sometimes it's one-off and sometimes it's structural. And the last one, next to last, expanding knowledge. So don't stop learning. So go to the portals once in a while, sign up for those discussion forums notices to keep learning. And lastly, to tie everything together. If you've done something, reflect on it. So if you've done a project and you do your closeout, don't only share the reflections and the lessons learned with the people that were in the project. Publish them. Make sure that we facilitate them in the lessons learned database, write an article about it, make a video about it, so other people can learn from it as well. And that is not just for the project that went really well, it's also for the project that we stopped or had to cancel or that did not go as we hoped it would, because actually that's where we learn a lot from. And for example, in my previous role, one of the vice presidents would actually send out an email every month with not like the success story, but also like we stopped this project for these reasons, and we want to celebrate that people stopped the project because it was, for example, not economically feasible or it wasn't the best choice, and we all should learn from that. So it's not just about the hooray, this project went really well, and look, this is why it was a success, but also share when something did not go as planned, because that's usually where we learn the most from. So if we then just take a theoretical view, so say you would work at Shell and you would start your day and say your name is Sarah, and you start your day and you sign into your account and hey, she's an expert in a certain field, and the system tells her, hey, there's an article in your area, maybe you want to approve that because someone has made an edit and they just want to check if that's okay. She then goes over to the sign, so that's the Shell discussion forums, to see if someone needs help. And people type, for example, seeking help, so maybe you can help out. Maybe you've been assigned with a new task, and you're like, hey, do I know the right people to talk to? And you know the people around you in your own team, but you could just go to the expertise finder to find people that you might want to set up a call with, or just get some advice from. She may get a message saying, hey, the document that you posted in Knowledge Repository 18 months ago is now up for renewal. Please, check that it's still up to date. Maybe she's posted a question in the morning, and the science systems sometimes are very quick. It could be that a couple of hours later, you already have some replies from people. She may be asked to look at certain decisions that were made and capture lessons learned. And then lastly, but not least, it is something that I'm involved in as well, because people are retiring, is that we do ROC interviews, retention of critical knowledge. So when people leave Shell or they're switching to another project, we set up facilitated knowledge capture interviews. Yeah, so it's a structured interview, sometimes lasts 2.5 to 3 hours on one topic alone, and that is basically to get down to the specific details on what someone's experience has been. Why did they make certain decisions? What have they learned? What would they have done differently? So, for example, last Monday, my manager's retiring after a long career at Shell, so we did a 2.5-hour rock interview with him on his leadership lessons learned and change management, because he has a lot of experience. So his successor is in the room, his peers are in the room, and I will facilitate a very structured interview to get him talking, and then facilitating a question and answer with the audience. And usually this goes, this is usually the first time that these people can talk for over an hour, because these people are very busy. But we want to make sure that before they leave, we can ask them, what were like the key nuggets? What opportunities do you see? What risks do you see? And what would you advise us when you are leaving? Okay. So, and then we're heading towards the tail end of the presentation. So knowledge management is not something we did overnight. Yeah, so knowledge management, as I said, started before I believe it was even a word, like in the early 90s. We started doing it structurally around, say, the early 2000, 2005, but then it was fragmented. So different parts of Shell were doing it on their own in a different way. Come, say, 2012, we realized that we should have one approach. We are one company, and this will only work if we do this in a structured way with the same tools, same taxonomy, same governance, because otherwise it's going to be too fragmented. So we organized the rollout of knowledge management in what we call waves. And as you can see, January 2014, June 2015, discipline engineering, my area, I wasn't there in the role at the time, was one of the first. So at that time, we set up a complete project team. We set up the discussion areas, the portals, the taxonomy. We did training, we did promotion, what have you. And then slowly we went through other technical functions. So these are the major technical functions. And some of you may ask, hey, I don't see HR on that list. I don't see finance on that list. Aren't they relevant for knowledge management? Well, yes, they are, but these are our key, areas that make a huge difference, and where we also want to retain a lot of knowledge. And these have a huge influence on the way how Shell operates. Plus, they have an existing governance structure that we can tie into. So while IT and finance are officially not mentioned here, they are also doing parts of knowledge management. Usually not everything, because they work in a different way, or their knowledge retention needs are lower than, say, a technical area like engineering or maritime, but they do it. We're covering currently about 23% of the staff in Shell, and we're still looking at are there specific pockets where we want to implement knowledge management officially. So if there is a new community of practice, the kits, the approach is there, and we can start doing it. And then let me wrap up and give you some things that I think are important when you are considering your knowledge management approach, or you're thinking about starting it. And the one thing, it may sound like a cliche, it's less about IT tools. I cannot count the amount of emails that I get on a monthly basis from vendors saying, oh, Dennie, I see you're working knowledge management. I have a brilliant search engine. I have machine analytics. I've got something that will solve all your problems. It's just a tool. The tool is only as good as the use you make out of it. We're never pitching IT tools to the community. We're talking to them to solve business problems. And in engineering, for example, it is that we have a distributed workforce. So a refinery in Indonesia may have a problem that has already been solved in a refinery in, say, the US. How do these people find each other? How do these people solve problems faster to make sure that our operations are safe and reliable, and we're not spending a lot of money to solve problems? That is a business problem. So if I go to vice president and if I tell them, well, dear Susan, I'm here to implement KM, she will say, well, thank you, but my people are far too busy. If I tell her If I can help you solve problems quicker or distribute lessons quicker so you can learn quicker, then I've got people's attention. So we also capture success stories. So every month, our moderators capture success stories. And it can be about, we saved $1,000 with asking a question and getting an answer. It can be about a project that we stopped a few years ago and we were thinking about restarting it. And we were quickly able to restore all of that knowledge online, identify the people that worked in it, so the project could start not in 3 months, but it could start in 1 month. So we capture all of that so our leaders also understand how important this is. Change management, maybe I should say this like 50 times. It's often undervalued, but people's behavior has to change, and that is not easy. Some people will, understand it immediately, but we spend a lot of time to make sure that people understand it. And just to illustrate rewards and recognition, that's one of my favorite areas. Is every year I have the Knowledge Management Champion of the Year award. Yeah, so every community in engineering can submit a Knowledge Management Champion. It can be a graduate that hosted a lessons learned workshop. It can be a moderator that made sure every question was answered on time. It can be someone that made a video about a very technical problem and summarized it in 10 minutes, and then that video was watched 1,500 times. So these people get an award from me, but I also make sure that they get an email from one of the vice presidents. And usually I try to make sure that that email is sent to them right before year-end appraisal, because nothing is more exciting than going to your year-end appraisal and your manager has received an email about you from a vice president. That makes you shine. I don't have to stress that there's a lot of pain before gain. You have to invest a lot before this is running. This is not a tool that you flip on and it works. You have to plan this, train people, get them excited, and keep that investment going. This is not something that will run by itself. I've talked about governance, processes, and roles. Search is vital. People Google everything. So in Shell we usually say, well, you can Shuggle that because we've got the Shell Google system. So we point people to the search engine, but we better make sure that this works. We've started with implementing knowledge management in those areas of Shell where we know we had a high chance of success, because either there were there was a lot of interest in it, or there were senior leaders that were excited about this, or there were certain business problems that we knew, like, man, if we start there, we have traction there. And then lastly, but not least, is that performance dashboard. Yeah, so everyone who's involved in knowledge management can see whether the behaviors that they're showing, the awards that we're giving, the recognition that we're giving, the promotion that we're doing, whether that pays off. And that makes sure that we can only be successful if we know what we're doing and whether that is paying off. That was a long story, and I've only been able to capture some key points of that. And now I'm hoping that there are some interesting questions. Catherine.
And thank you so much for that presentation. I feel you can really tell you're a person who is used to sharing information. I'm thinking about just starting from the top. I think the first question we had was someone interested to hear more about finding, collecting, analyzing the digital tracks that workers create / leave.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So I realized about 4 years ago that we were storing, just look at the discussion forums. So we have discussion forums going back 15 to 20 years, thousands and thousands of messages. But the forums were set up for Q&A. So you can search them, like, did someone ever ask a question? But we've never thought about seeing whether we could get additional benefit from it. And I was actually interested whether there are experts in the company that are not officially named experts. So I work with IT to basically mine the discussion forums for engineering, and then see if I enter a certain word, say, I don't know, pipeline corrosion, who has posted the most questions and the most replies about that topic? Is that the known expert on file, Or is that someone else? So maybe there's someone else out there, maybe a junior engineer in a refinery somewhere, or somewhere in a harbor, or in an office that we're not aware of. And that is actually fascinating. So people post questions and we can mine that to learn more about them. So one of my projects that I'm hoping to get more traction on is making sure that if people post their profile and I can check their posts, that we can help people find each other. Yeah. So if you're now going to the search engine, if I don't, I know a lot about writing fiction books. Well, it's not relevant for Shell, but say the communication department wanted to find someone who's good at writing fiction books. They would have no chance of finding me. But I've probably posted on the intranet in a discussion forum somewhere like, I've written 3 books. It's not in my profile. But if we were using a mining engine that would also mine my discussion, it would say, well, Dennie is not just knowledge management or records management or what have you. He's also said that he writes books, so you may want to talk to him. That is a lot of untapped potential.
And I feel you did mention some of it, but how does the organization offer incentives to update their profiles / skill sets? And I want to combine that with another question. If people are happy to share when things are not going so well.
So in the updating of the profile, that is hard. So we encourage people, we put it in the onboarding. So usually people do it because then they're just in the company, they still have time, they want to be visible. So we try to rely on role modeling. So senior leaders will have a completely up-to-date profile. All the experts have an up-to-date profile. And other than that, it is just making sure that we repeat it. So a lot of the virtual courses now will not yet mandate, but highly encourage you to fill out your profile. Because in a virtual class, if there's 40 people in the class, you don't have time to go around making introductions and telling, I worked here, I did this, I did that. So they're saying, well, as part of the homework before you come to class, fill out your profile, make it up to date. A day before you join the online class, you can check all the profiles. Like, hey, Joe also worked for Project X, or man, he worked in Nigeria. I also spent time there. So we're trying to make sure that it's not just seen as, oh, it's a thing you have to do, but it's handy for other purposes, like meeting introductions, or like sometimes there will be huge like if you have a discussion forum and someone answers your question, you quickly want to check, hey, who is that person? Why is he or she interested in this? And that helps people. And I must say, working from home now is actually helping us because people have to have a virtual presence now. And you had a second part of the question, which I've lost now.
If people are happy to share if things not going that well, but
normally I would say no. It is a thing we try not to talk about. It's usually not something that you. But we're seeing more and more managers asking about it, and I would say promoting it, because a mistake is frustrating and costs time and money, and that's okay, because you learn from it. But if you do the same mistake 2 or 3 times, it is costing more money. So in my previous role, we actually had a database of projects that were canceled, things that went wrong, and that was actually sponsored by one of the very senior vice presidents. He says, well, I have too often sat in meetings where people were pitching an idea to me, and he was scratching his head like, we tried that 3 years ago. Have you spoken to that person? Why that didn't work? And be like, oh, we didn't know that happened. And he said, no, I want to document that. So while it's usually not something people like to talk about, if you are the one in the project that was canceled, the thing that did not go well, you are really interested if you are the person that has to follow up on it or wants to do something that has been tried before. So usually it is not easy, but senior leader involvement really helps. And if people have experienced once that they can learn from something where someone has made a mistake or did something that you can learn from, people love that. They're like, great, because your lesson learned helps me be more successful.
And would you say that the adoption and buy-in of the knowledge management vary from country to country? I assume it might vary in how you train people. Or...
Yes, yeah, it is different in regions and it's different in certain parts. So, for example, engineering has been. It took us a long time. People were used to sharing in pockets, like all the pipelines engineers would share. They would have their own conferences. They would have their own magazines. They would have their own, email networks. But then we said, okay, guys, you're not working in isolation. You are also working with other people. You also have to share with them. And then it becomes a little bit of us and them, and that's what we're trying to break. Yeah, that you should share more freely, because as you saw in the chain of Shell, nothing you do is in isolation. The people in exploration, rely on engineers. The people in finance rely on people in trading. So the more you collaborate, the easier it is, and that's indeed a lot of the culture that you have to do and a lot of training. Yeah, let me leave it at that.
And so to jump on to a more technical question, perhaps. Question one is: Have you integrated third-party content into your system?
Some, yeah, in parts where it's relevant. We have news feeds, yeah. And the third one, and I asked a question about copyright. What was that?
How do you manage copyright issues with internally posted documents?
That is a tricky one. One is if people get through the library or via our licensed copyrighted material, there is a warning. There are disclaimers on all the discussion forums that if you sign up, it shows you like you cannot post anything that is copyrighted. And we have some, we call it patron search engines, where you can tell the search engine to find certain type of documents. You give it like a document and it will search for similar documents, and we can take them away. It's not easy because it usually relies on people's behavior. And like I said, we have petabytes of information, so it's very hard to track everything.
I mean, we have tons of questions left, but it's also 1 minute to closing time. Yep. So,
shall we pick up the best question? What was the very first question?
That would be, Penny was interested to hear more about finding, collecting, analyzing the digital tracks that workers create or leaves.
Good. Yeah, that was a very interesting question. So if you can send me the name or the email address of that person, he or she, I will contact him or her and have a little bit of a follow-up on that.
Thank you so much for now, Dennie. It was really, really interesting. I think time went really quick. And our next webinar will be held on the 28th of October. We are proud to have Theodora Petkova joining us to tell us more about Solid, a web decentralization project led by Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web. So please keep an eye out for more information on this. Thank you very much for your time, all of you. Have a great evening, and until next time.